Now I ain't gonna lie, y'all had to do a review on this, and often I try not to put my opinions on these matters, but I'll be honest to you, I have to do a review on this episode Cam Newton had with Natalie Nunn. Because when I was watching it, I was sitting like, nah, I think this young lady definitely knows what she's doing, and she is great at sociology. That's what she studied. She's great at it. The reason why I'm saying she's great, because it was times during the interview or the podcast that I was sitting there asking myself, like, wait, have I seen an episode of Baddies? She was making it seem like this show was an entrepreneurship show the way she was talking about. I thought I never seen an episode. She was like, we talk about business. I got these young women getting their bag. We talking about how do you boss up. And I'm seeing like, wait, am I watching the right show? But I had to do a perspective on this because I'll be honest to y'all, it's imperative that we start to understand the importance of image and how image plays a role not only in the socialization of our children, but how it is that they start to think is acceptable for us to behave. And what I mean by socialization, right? Because I'm not going to just use terms that I'll ever explain it, because there's times people watch my videos where they may not be in that realm, use those academic terms, and it ain't really nothing special. It just times when you get in space and people just put language to our experiences. So socialization is really just the way in which we have been taught to behave in an environment, or the actions that we have been taught or conditioned to believe is acceptable in our environment. Prime example, in the neighborhood, you had to know how to wear Timbs. In a certain way, you lace your Timbs. That's a part of socialization. In certain environments, a certain way in which men need to know how to move and how to react, and even how we treat women. Some of us are taught that the more women you sleep with, the more of a man you are. That's a form of socialization. Another one is that some women are taught that they should not be doing all this catering for a man and being a housewife because that's subservient. That's a form of socialization. So what I'm saying about socialization is that there's things that uh, the youth today spend more time on our phones, on social media, on different devices than we do in taking direct information from our elders. So in many ways, I will say, and I make this statement, whoever disagree with it, I'd love to have that conversation, that we are being socialized more by media than we are by our parents. It's just essential that we start to understand as black people that there's some people who have never ever met a black person in their life or ever talked to one and had a real conversation with them. So the only perception of who we are that they have is based on the images that we see through TV. And I believe that is essential because not only does these images impact how it is that other people see us, but most importantly, it impacts how it is that we see ourselves. And especially our children. Like I try to ask people whenever I'm teaching class about media literacy, it's like, all right, even if you feel like you have the ability to discern what images or what is that you're receiving as truth and what is just solely entertainment, how is it that you think these images impact your children? Those that you feel like may not have developed the cognitive ability to yet determine what images they are seeing as false and which ones are actually realistic. Because the reality is that not all people can distinguish it, and none of us are exempt. So I don't feel like they're talking like this third person idea as if like I'm exempt from the influence of media. The biggest reason to why I even aspire to be who it is that I aspire to be, and why is that I speak or carry myself the way that I carry myself that I do today, is because of the images that I was receiving as a child. It was seeing Louis Farrakhan, seeing James Baldwin at William F. Buckley in a debate. It was seeing Muhammad Ali on the Dev Gavin show, sitting there speaking upon being a black athlete. It was me watching these speeches, seeing Stokely Carmichael and Angela Davis at a conference speaking. It was these images I was seeing. Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin having a conversation. Seeing a video of Thomas Sankara. Seeing Malcolm X. Watching these speeches. It was the images I was receiving as a child. Michael Jackson. And it was like, oh, I guess this is what I want to be that. And it was the images that played a role in how it is that I even became how it is that I am today. So I want us to understand the importance of media, and I just thought about it. So now I'm going to get into the interview. The first thing I noticed that she's very intentional in understanding the difference between how she portrays herself outside her household and how is it that she portrays herself in media. And I thought that was interesting because she made it very apparent that she doesn't allow the TV in the house for her children to even watch the shows that she creates. But yet you're not cognizant or care or have any form of regard for the children that are watching your shows. And I think a big part to that, and why many influencers, those that have platforms, may not necessarily consider the impact that they're having or see, is because they're not necessarily in the environments to see how what they're creating is impacting the behavior of the youth. Like a prime example, I work in a school right now where I facilitate, and I see how the young women starting to carry themselves, how they starting to dress. And I know a big part of that is the image they seeing. It's the way that media is defining beauty or what they feel they need to do in order to attract men. These things don't just happen subconsciously. It's because of the images and the message that we're receiving that make us feel as men like the only thing we contribute to society is money, and as women, the only thing that we can have to attract certain men is to get our butt done or their butt done. But it's because the messages we are receiving and the fact that she was blatant on the fact that how she is inside her household and that she don't allow the camera in her house because she's a total different woman than the world get to meet means that she is cognizant of the messages that she's creating, but also the impact that those messages have on children. For she's privy to and make sure that her children doesn't see those things so that they are not influenced by those type of images. They even homeschool. Like I sat here and I thought about this, like, wow, she's very intentional and she knows what she's doing. So there's times even during watching the interview, I'm like, I don't know if this is her doing her media personnel and playing to what we say, playing the game and playing to the media, or is this truly who she is? And why I'm saying it, because there are women like that. And she said it on the show, which got me a little mad. She was like, you making it seem like we are depicting a part of our reality that's not realistic. Like people fight every day. I'm looking at her like, nah, I'm not saying that people fight every day, but I am asking you, is that what we want to show? I'm not saying it don't happen, but are all parts of our reality meant to be depicted on TV? And I wrote this down. I thought it was essential, so I might even put it on a shirt. I said there was a time period where we used to be in a race and competition to see who would be the first to televise the revolution. And now it seems like we in a race to see who be the first to advertise our division. And it made me think about that. It's like, what are you saying? Like, what do you mean? That this is reality that people fight? Yeah, people fight, but is that something I want to show though? I'm not saying women don't fight. I'm not saying it's not a part of people reality, but is that something that we want to accept as like normality? Is it normal that we always fighting? No, it's not. And the other part of it is that it's not everybody reality. So what she mean by that? Everybody are not fighting every day. That's not a part of every reality. And that's something that we got to debunk too, because I remember, again, teaching a class, I asked these students, I said, yo, do you believe there's some people that never lost a friend to gun violence? And they looked at me like, nah, we don't. I believe everybody did. I said, well, you think everybody did? And I said, yo, honestly, y'all, I know of various people that never lost a friend to gun violence. And many of them happen to be white. Some of them are black and of a different class. So what I want y'all to know is that your experiences is not normal to everyone. But you have normalized them because it's something that reoccurred in your life. But just because of reoccurrence don't mean that it's normal. You can experience the abnormal consistently. That's reality. And the fact that she was cognizant of it, but I feel like she just never seen the effects that it's actually having on youth. And if you was in schools and seeing how the culture of women in regards to how they dress, what they deem to be like respectable wear, they way of defining what's acceptable to wear in certain spaces, and then how they speak. Like I talked to a young lady, I was like, yo, would you be on Baddies? She said, yeah. She said, we fight every day, so why not get paid to do it? I was hurt when I heard that. That drink really hurt me. I was like, nah, what in the world? But if these shows are showing them like, yo, this is a part of it, it's like, they think that's okay. And not even that it's okay. They think that if people getting paid to do it and I be fighting, why not get paid to fight? I said, if you want to get paid to fight, become a boxer. We have things that you can do to get paid to fight. Go do WWE, MMA. Go be a professional fighter. Real life. The second part I want to talk about is, he asked this question and I thought was real good and it stumped her. He said, why should a man take a baddie seriously? And she didn't know what to say at first. And you should have seen her respond. She said, because we pay the bills. I said, nah, y'all. First of all, as men, a criteria that we often hold women to is not a woman that must have the bag. We think of how you make us feel, certain intrinsic values, some things that we deem to be like part of womanhood, nurture, love, knowing how to cook, knowing how to speak life into your man. These attributes that we think about and characteristics we attach to women, but not money. And the fact that she said the reason why a man should take a baddie seriously because she pays the bills really had me sitting there like, damn, we are losing right now. In regards to, there is a part of our community that believe that money is the be all, it is everything. Like, money is not everything, y'all. In a moment we get to a place where we think that money is what's gonna sustain a relationship, your relationship is in jeopardy. Because you may meet people with more money than you. You will meet people with more money. There will always be somebody with more money than you. So if money was the foundation of your relationship, even hard times happen. And trust me, sometimes people aggravate you. And I sat here and thought about it. She said, yeah, my children wanted a pool and I was able to spend $1 million to get them a pool. I said, wow. A big part of parenting may be being able to provide your children with some material things, but the reality is that a child does not define your love based on what you bought them, but based on the time that you spend with them. Based on what they get to learn from their guardian. And I sat here and I thought about it. I'm like, damn, y'all. Imagine we started to define parenting or think that parenting only has to do with money. I don't even imagine how many people have parents that the only thing they could do was give them a check. They never really got to even get to know their parent. Their parent always out the house working. But they're able to buy them things, but they don't know their parent. And I wanted to know that how children spell love is Time, not Love. It's time. That's a big part of it. So even when it came to that, because there's some women I believe do think like that, some men as well. And I know children that had parents that all they did with them was buy them things. I have friends that did not do good in school, had bad grades, and even was not applying what we knew they were capable of doing, but their parents bought them things. And they thought that was love. And that child may really feel as if he's not being loved and nurtured and guided as a child because the only thing his parents are doing is providing with the tangible things. And I thought that was a great question. And then I want to also address this thing she kept saying within this episode. She kept asking, are you judging me? You're real snooty. And I be saying things like, why do we think we're going to have a society where people are not held to a criteria? I actually believe there ought to be a criteria for certain things. One of them, I believe, is how we carry ourselves. And everybody, is subjective depending on what your group and your nation that you want to build will hold yourself to. But I do believe there ought to be some form of a criteria that we hold each other to. Absolutely. Definitely parent. I'm not saying that there's one way to parent, but there ought to be some things we agree upon. Like, we're not going to smoke and twerk with our children. There's certain things that we ought to create a criteria for, right? And I'm going to end here. It's like, she said, why are you judging me? You're real snooty. And I'm like, nah, there ought to be criteria to hold ourselves to. And the fact that we have entered a time period of people who don't want to be held to a criteria, I think is actually bad. We need to bring back shame. We need to build back, this is how it is to carry ourselves as young black men. This is how it looks to carry ourselves as young women. I heard somebody tell me the other day, they said every man ought to have a constitution. But what I want to say is that every individual ought to have a constitution. And what we mean by that is like a set of rules, policies, morals, things that or principles that you hold yourself to. Like, we all need to have our constitution. There's things that I just won't do no matter how much money you pay me. I won't speak certain way because I don't use my platform based on the money, bro. I don't go do that. And people always ask me, Jay, could you come speak here, speak here? I'm like, yeah, I would love to when God grants me with the message. I'm not just doing this for the money. And it ought to be a criteria in a constitution you hold yourself to. And then I was saying that you have the ability to create your own environment, because I was talking to a young man today in class, and he was saying that your environment matters. Like, it's hard for me to stop doing certain things when I'm in an environment where that's what I see all day. And I say, yo, why that is important, that's true. Know that you too have the ability to create your own environment. Meaning that you could find a friend that say, like, yo, boy, we gonna wake up at 5 a.m. every day. And I wanted them to know that you have the ability to also create a culture. Like, create your culture starts with an individual. It usually starts with one, then the one helps assist a two, the two helps assist four. And now you start seeing a nation and a village being built based upon the criteria they built upon each other. I want to know that you have the power to build an environment, because often a culture and the development of a culture starts with an individual. And there's times where I was the first to do certain things. Like, I went to a school called Eagle Academy where we wore uniforms. And a lot of young men didn't wear uniforms. And be honest to you, my stepfather didn't have that leniency. He said, nah, if you're supposed to wear black shoes, that's what you're going to wear. We're not doing sneakers. And what I started to notice that when I started coming in with my uniform, a lot of my friends started to wear their uniform. Or I would get some of my friends like, yo, bro, let's wear our uniform. Let's do this. And as we started to do it, we started to see other young men aspire to do the same. And then we started to build our own culture, our own nation, our own village within the school. But what I want y'all to know is that not only, don't make it seem like you just have to do what your environment is doing or those that's around you doing. Know that you have the ability to also create your own environment. And what I'm going to do before I even end this, I try my best not to just speak, right? Because a lot of people are just speaking heads, but I also wanted to pass down information and knowledge. And the way I'm going to do it this time is by speaking to two books that I will recommend you all to read. So the first book I say that talks a lot about media and brainwashing. It's called Brainwash by Tom Burrell. This is a book that I actually recommend for you all to read. And why I say that, because there's certain things that happen Or I would say black people in their relation to media has been very much different throughout the years. And a lot of people don't speak to it, right? And while I say our relationship is different because we were bought here, right? And who we were was sold to us because who we was something they wanted to deprive us of. That's deep. Don't let that go over your head. So in this book, it speaks about this idea of brainwashing, how media played a role in stripping us of the understanding of who we are, right? And it's two words that they talk about that I feel like even applies to this conversation between Natalie Nunn and Cam Newton, which is first a Jezebel and the other one is a stud. I heard the terms being used, but I didn't know it at first. When we hear the word Jezebel, right, it talks about a woman that really uses her lust and her promiscuity to attract men. And they call them Jezebels, right? And you hear some people like, be mindful of a Jezebel spirit. And in the book, they speak upon this idea of how women have been portrayed through media to be like the sexually permissive, and how this was used to justify the exploitation of black women. And I was like, wow, it's important for us to understand some of these things. And he just walks through the history of how media has just been used to normalize and portray us as black men and women. The other one he used was this analogy with LeBron James. It was an advertisement he did, I think it was in 2005, right? If I'm mistaken, 2017, 2016 actually. And he was on the front cover, and I'm going to put the image right here, with a woman, a white woman, holding her screen with a basketball. And then he showed another image, which was of King Kong and a white woman. And we can see like these two images, how you can see how someone can get you to enact a certain thing that you feel is innocent, right? Yet they get you to enact something that's actually an insult to your people. But because you may have not learned what has happened in the past, you are acting in a manner that actually can be derogatory or insulting to your ancestors and those that have come before you. But because you have not learned it, you don't even know that you're insulting yourself. You feel like they just doing something that's innocent, but yet they got you playing a role in compromising your own image and the image of your people. And that image right there just stood out. And he speaks about this in a book. And I'm like, yo, how did we never hear about that? And then I want to talk about the other word that he mentions in, was just called a stud. And they use the word stud, right? And I never really heard people use it in day-to-day conversation. But as I started entering like academic and media spaces or just around black people, I heard the word stud before. And I never really knew what they meant at first. But what they meant was a black man that was used solely for sexual prowess. So an example, on the slave plantation, what they used to do was get one of the strongest black men and use him to reproduce. Like his whole sole purpose was to use his penis. Like they turned us into objects where your only role on this plantation was to produce slaves, or what they called at the time, because we were under ownership, was property, right? And they would have these black men go and even impregnate their own family members. And they would call them studs. And we just never even heard about that. And they talk about now how like black men have been taught to see our sex as like what it is that makes us dominant. Like us having sex over with multiple women. And he was like, in many ways we are enacting out what our oppressors made us feel was the right thing. And what they used us as, which is a form of property only to produce more property. And when I heard, I was like, damn. And I thought this book in itself was so essential because it just helped to reaffirm and to teach me how there's times where we could be made to do things that's actually an insult because if we never received the information on what happened prior to us, we would never know. The second book I would say is called, it says Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery by Dr. Naeem Akbar. I even ask you to, or encourage you to go watch some of his videos on YouTube. And what he talks about is breaking the chains of psychological slavery, and said that there's some things that have lingering effects on us from slavery. And he poses these questions that I believe are very essential, which is like, how is it that like the nation or those that was the father of civilization have become a group of people that now today know nothing about who they are and feel like they haven't contributed anything to society? And he say because we were psychologically conditioned and psychologically enslaved. And what he talks about a lot, and many scholars would talk about this, like we heard Steve Biko, he would say that the most powerful weapon in the hands of our oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And he talks about this and he breaks it down in so many ways. And I felt like it was just essential. Like he talks about this, and I thought this was important. He was saying the relationship between religious imagery and the psychological development of the mind. And he talked about the references to the Bible. He was like, when white people read the Bible, they see the God as themselves. But when black people say they read the Bible, they see themselves not even in the text, yet they see themselves as be like subservient. And he's like, religious images played a big role. And if it wasn't important, they would have never did it. If it wasn't important, they would have never turned Jesus white. They never painted the image of it if it wasn't important. A lot of black people, people that spiritual, like, does it matter if Jesus was black or not? Does it matter? Yeah, it mattered. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't have said it. And if we started to see that Jesus looked more like us, we would too see ourselves as a image of Jesus, which was made in the likeness of his, like in the image and likeness of him. But it's important for us to see the images. And he would say this simple thing that I've heard said in many speeches, which is that it said, when you look at an image, what is the first thing you look for? Yourself. And he said, if you're reading a book or looking through history and the part that looks like you was omitted, then you don't see any type of relationship to this history. And he talks about this, the power image. So I want to encourage you to do it. And while I'm even on this topic, it makes me want to talk about the show I just watched, which is King David, right? It's called The House of David, which talks about King David in the Bible. And I don't know why am I the only one, or I feel like I'm the only one that's mad that Hollywood has created all these shows from Genesis, the book of Jacob or Joshua, and all these characters in the biblical stories and that's being depicted on media are white. And I sit back and sometimes think like, why none of us ever confronted the fact that Hollywood has done a great job depicting these black people that's in the Bible as white men and white women. Like Esther was black, Jesus was black, David was black. The Israelites that left Egypt was black. Egypt at the time was ruled by black people. This is important to me. And I wonder why I sometimes feel like I'm the only one that's frustrated based on the way media is manipulated and believe and see the Bible. And I believe a lot of times we don't even see ourselves in the Bible. It wasn't until recent when I actually went to church and heard a sermon where they talk about the book of Esther and how Esther was actually a black woman. I actually thought about the importance of reaffirming us and understanding that there are images, or to understand how we exist within the Bible. And it's important. So I even want us to critique the images that we're receiving outside of just the text that we read in. While I encourage you to read those two books, I want you to also become critical of what you're consuming. Because a lot of media a lot of people within Hollywood and executives have done a great job creating these shows that make us feel as though we were not in the Bible. They admit us. They admit our presence. And I just thought about that. Like, I watched that show. It was a good show, absolutely. But it had made me feel even more empowered by the images which Naeem Akbar talks about if I just saw that King David was black. They could have left Goliath white. Because to see David, a black man, knock out a big, tall, white giant, I'd have been okay with that. I ain't gonna lie, as long as he won the battle. But to see, like, I would have loved to see the black Israelites go into battle. Like, when we seen David, we seen Jonathan and them going to battle. If those black men and see them with their swords killing, that junk would have made me feel like I was once a warrior. And that's just how powerful media is, because a lot of people watch these shows. These shows be #1 recommended on these platforms, and yet they depict all these characters to be white as if black people did not exist in the Bible. And I want us to become critical of those things, right? So be mindful of what you consume when it comes to media, the images, but also I need y'all to start reading some of these books that I'm recommending. So those 2 books I recommend, but even I want y'all to reassess and critically assess some of the shows that we've been watching. Like, I don't know how they even making these biblical stories and admitting black characters as if they weren't black. It's sad to say. But that's the message for today. I'd love to see y'all comments, y'all reaction. If y'all watch King David, let me know what y'all think about it. If y'all have anything to oppose, and we can have a full conversation on the black people that exist in the Bible, I'm willing to have that conversation for sure, in the scholastic manner and all above. But I want to get that message off my chest, and I encourage y'all just to read those books I recommended. And let's watch the show. Let's have a conversation around that. But also know that we are definitely in a state of psychological slavery. And the only way to recondition ourselves is through education. Right, because the moment you learn things, you start to think differently. And I started noticing this, which is a big thing, which is that it's good to pass down oral stories, but there's also a difference between having like tangible evidence, like being able to go see statues, right? Like I stated, I still speak in my previous video, being able to actually go to Egypt and see a black pharaoh, to see those black paintings. It's much more different just hearing stories, because stories, it's like we think they fables or folklore, things as such, but to see tangible evidence is important. And I thought about this, like if you wanted to strip a nation, or if you wanted to take on it, or say if you control the nation through war, right? So we have prisoners of war, and we're saying we don't want to slaughter them, but we do want to maintain control over the people. What would you do? And I thought about it. I said, if you wanted to maintain control over them and never allow them to ever want to overthrow their oppressor, what you need to do is strip them of their history. So the first thing we ought to do is burn their books. And we've seen even in Nazi Germany, one of the things that the first thing the Germans did, and the Nazis did to Jewish people, was they went and burnt their books. And we don't talk about the massive book burning that happened. Because they understood that in order to deprive a people and to get them to maintain slavery, it started, or what needed to happen was psychological slavery. You need to be a psychological warfare. And in order for me to maintain that slavery mindset over you, I had to strip you of any references you had of who you was prior to who you are now. And what we really had to do was separate the parents from the children, so the parents could stop telling the stories, and all the children had to believe was what it is that we told them they were. Because they have no access to the evidence of who they were prior to us telling them. So the only thing they have to believe is what we tell them that they were. And this is how it works, y'all. This is psychological warfare that we in. So I encourage, again, those that have some recommendations, any books you want to recommend, comment them. Anything you want to refer that or suggest that I watch, let me know. But we have to do a job of teaching and re-educating our youth, because that's the only way to win this psychological warfare, is to find ways to re-socialize and recondition our children. So I'm going to land there. This is my brand voice. You want to purchase a hoodie, definitely go to my Instagram at Jordan Pierre, and you could DM me, and I'll definitely send you the link to purchase the hoodies. It's JordanPiere, and this is Voice. I love building with y'all. Let's go.